If these stories mean something to you, please subscribe. Your subscription means more to me than you can imagine. It is motivation. It is the reason I continue telling these stories. And write in the comments where you are watching from. Now let's begin. Alevtina Kirilenko built what everyone around considered a perfect life. At 34, she lived with her husband Arseny Kovalenko in a spacious apartment on Kokryakova Street in the central district of Ekaterinburg. Their windows faced east, toward the Ural Mountains, the boundary between Europe and Asia. On clear days, the white peaks stood like ancient guardians over the city. The apartment reflected their success. Parquet floors under Persian rugs, bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, framed photographs from St. Petersburg, Paris, and the Amalfi Coast. A samovar, a family heirloom from Arseny's grandmother, held a place of honor in the dining room. Arseny, 38, was a successful architect at one of the most prestigious firms in the Sverdlovsk region. His name appeared in business magazines. His photographs sometimes appeared in local newspapers. He moved through life with the easy confidence of a man who had never known failure. Alevtina worked as a curator at the Ekaterinburg Museum of Fine Arts on Boevodina Street. She had studied art history at the Ural Federal University and loved her work with a quiet passion. She organized exhibitions, corresponded with galleries in Moscow and St. Petersburg, and spent her days surrounded by paintings and sculptures. They had been married for 10 years. There were no children, but not for lack of trying. Doctors at the regional hospital had not given them much hope, explaining that some mysteries of the body cannot be solved. Over time, they learned to accept their life as it was, comfortable, stable, filled with small joys. Their 10th anniversary was approaching. Alevtina had been planning the celebration for months. 120 guests in a banquet hall on the 7th floor of the Hyatt Hotel. A live band that had once performed at the Kremlin. A 12-tier cake from the best confectionery in the city on Malasheva Street. It was meant to be the event of the season, a testament to 10 years of love. Arseny seemed excited as well. Every morning he kissed her on the forehead before work. He complimented her dresses. He held her hand at dinner. By all outward appearances, he was the perfect husband. But appearances, as Alevtina was about to learn, can be deeply deceptive. The call came on a Tuesday. Alevtina was in her office at the museum, reviewing reports on the condition of paintings for the upcoming exhibition of Soviet realists, when her phone vibrated on the polished surface of the desk. Outside the window, the grey Ekaterinburg sky pressed down on the city, heavy with the promise of new snow. A tram rattled along Lenin Avenue. Its bells rang faintly in the distance, while workers in heavy coats hurried along the frozen sidewalks. She glanced at the screen. Caller ID, Rima Vasilchuk. Rima Vasilchuk was not just a seamstress, she was an institution in Ekaterinburg. For 40 years she had run a small atelier on Malasheva Street. A cozy shop filled with rolls of fine fabric, antique sewing machines, and the smell of wool and thread. She had dressed 3 generations of the city's elite, Soviet officials of the 1970s, newly rich oligarchs of the 1990s, and now the professional class that had emerged in the new century. Over the years, she had also become a close friend of Alevtina. "Rima, dear, what a pleasant surprise," Alevtina replied, pressing the phone between her shoulder and ear, continuing to type. "Arseny's suit is ready. There's very little time left before the anniversary. Come now." Rima's voice was quiet, insistent, unlike anything Alevtina had ever heard from the usually warm and unhurried woman. "Go into the back fitting room and hide. Don't ask why. Don't tell anyone. Just come." The line went dead. Alevtina stared at the phone. The screen went dark. She sat frozen for a long moment. Her thoughts raced between possibilities: a robbery, a threat, something had happened to Arseny. She needed to call back. She needed to ask questions. But something in Rima's voice, something primal and frightened, made her move. She grabbed her coat, told her assistant she had a family emergency, and stepped out into the cold. The wind hit like a wall. The temperature had dropped to -15. The air burned her cheeks. She walked quickly down Voevodina Street past the church on the blood, built on the site where the last Tsar and his family were executed. The golden domes gleamed against the gray sky, beautiful and terrible. She turned onto Malasheva and quickened her pace. Rima Vasilchuk's atelier occupied the ground floor of a pre-revolutionary building that had somehow survived the Civil War, the Soviet era, and the chaotic 90s. Its windows were fogged with age, and above the door hung a wooden sign with her name in gold Cyrillic letters. Inside, the building smelled of old wood and history. Alevtina arrived breathless, her cheeks burning from the cold. She pushed the door open, a small bell rang. The shop seemed empty. Rolls of fabric stood in neat rows, deep blues, rich reds, elegant blacks. A half-finished dress lay on the cutting table. Pin still stuck out of its seams. The curtain leading to the fitting rooms was drawn. Alevtina. Rima's voice came from behind the curtain. Quick, come here. Alevtina pulled the curtain aside and stepped into the narrow corridor leading to 3 small fitting rooms. Rima was waiting there. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly. She was a stocky woman in her 60s, with gray hair tied in a bun and eyes that had seen too much over the decades. Today those eyes were wet with unshed tears. Here. Rima pulled her toward the last fitting room, a cramped nook with a heavy velvet curtain instead of a door. Hide. Don't make a sound. No matter what you hear. Rima, what does all this mean? Alevtina whispered. You're scaring me. Rima's eyes softened for a moment. She reached out and squeezed Alevtina's hands. Her fingers were rough from decades of sewing, but the grip was warm. I'm sorry, my dear, more than you will ever know. But you need to see the truth, see it with your own eyes, otherwise you will never believe it. Now go. They will be here any minute. Alevtina stepped into the fitting room. Rima pulled the curtain shut, and then she was left alone in the darkness, surrounded by the smell of wool and dust. Her heart was pounding against her ribs. She waited. 5 minutes passed, or maybe 5 seconds. Time lost all meaning in the cramped darkness of the fitting room. She could hear her own breathing, too fast, too loud. She pressed her hand to her chest, trying to calm it. Then she heard the bell above the front door ring. Rima, dear, a male voice, warm and familiar. Arsini, we've come for the final fitting. Alevtina pressed her eye to the tiny gap between the curtain and the wall. Through it, she could see the main hall of the atelier in fragments. Part of the cutting table, the corner of a mirror, the edge of the reception desk. Arsini entered, shaking snow from his coat. He looked handsome, as always. His dark hair was touched with gray at the temples, and his smile was easy and confident. He was dressed for work, a gray coat, expensive leather gloves, shoes that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Behind him, laughing at something he had said, another figure entered. A woman, young, blonde, beautiful. Smizana Kirilenko. Smizana was Alevtina's younger sister, 28 years old. She had always been the favorite, the one who charmed everyone effortlessly. Their mother used to say that Smizana was born smiling and never stopped. She had their father's light hair and their mother's green eyes, a combination that stopped people in their tracks. Once, she and Alevtina had been close, sharing secrets, clothes, and dreams. But in recent years, a distance had grown between them. Smizana was constantly traveling for work. She was a buyer in the fashion world. She spent more time in Moscow and Milan than in Ekaterinburg. When she visited, their conversations were superficial, polite, empty. What was she doing here? Ah, the anniversary couple. Rima's voice was even, perfectly professional. Alevtina was amazed at how calm she sounded. Come in, come in. I have both outfits ready. Mr. Kovalenko, you will be in the first room. Miss Kirilenko in the second. Alevtina's blood ran cold. Both outfits. She watched as Smizana kissed Arsini on the cheek. A casual peck. The kind of kiss family members exchange. But something in the way Snezana's hand lingered on his sleeve, something in the way Arseni's eyes followed her as she walked away, made Aleftina's stomach tighten. Snezana disappeared into the fitting room next to Aleftina. Arseni went into the one opposite. For several minutes, there was only the rustle of fabric and Rima's quiet instructions. Aleftina barely breathed. She pressed herself against the wall, trying to become invisible, trying to hear everything. Then voices. They will match perfectly, Snezana said from her room. Her voice was muffled by the thin wall, but clear enough. Everyone will be surprised, right? Arseni laughed. Surprised is not the word. Shocked, horrified. Don't be cruel. There was a teasing note in Snezana's voice. After all, she's my sister. Your sister? Arseni's voice dropped. 2 years, Snezana. 2 years. Pretending at family dinners. 2 years watching her plan this ridiculous anniversary party. 2 years sleeping in her bed and pretending I don't dream about you. I'm so tired. 2 years. The word struck Aleftina like a physical blow. She clamped her hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. 2 years. All their anniversary planning, their trips, their quiet evenings at home, it had all been a lie. 1 more week, Snezana said. The party on Saturday. Sunday morning we transfer the money and book the tickets. By Monday we'll be in Turkey. She'll never find us. And the account? Arseni asked. 500,000? Yes. 500,000 from the joint savings account, plus everything you can withdraw from the business accounts. Your name is on those too, right? On most of them. Arseni's voice was casual, as if they were discussing a grocery list or football scores. She trusted me completely. Never once questioned the withdrawals. She signs everything I put in front of her. She never even looked at the statements. Snezana laughed. It was a beautiful sound, light and musical. Aleftina had always loved her sister's laughter. They had laughed together as children, hiding under blankets, sharing secrets. Now that laughter made her want to scream. She was always too trusting, Snezana said. Remember when we were kids? I told her the sky was green, and she believed me. I said I didn't eat the last piece of cake, and she said, okay. Some things never change. Some things, Arseni agreed. But after Sunday, she won't be our problem anymore. We'll be in Antalya, a villa by the sea. She can keep her precious museum, her friends, and her stupid samovar. We'll have everything. And her money, Snezana added. And her money, Arseni confirmed. Aleftina's body shook uncontrollably. Tears streamed down her face, hot against her frozen cheeks. She wanted to burst out from behind the curtain. Confront them both. Scratch their eyes out and scream until her throat bled. She imagined it vividly. The shock on their faces, the scene, the chaos. But then she felt a hand on her shoulder. She almost cried out, but another hand covered her mouth. Rima. The old seamstress had slipped silently into the fitting room. In her other hand, she held a smartphone with a dark screen, the recording app open. Her eyes were stern, determined. Rima placed the phone into Aleftina's hands and pointed at the curtain. Then she slipped out again, as silently as she had appeared. Aleftina understood. She raised the phone, aimed it at the gap in the curtain, and pressed record. For the next 20 minutes, she filmed everything. Arseni and Snezana came out of the fitting rooms to show each other their outfits. They posed together in front of the mirror, with their arms around each other's waists, laughing like lovers. Snezana was wearing a dark blue dress that matched Arseni's tie. They looked as if they were made for each other. They looked like a couple. They kept talking about their plans. A villa in Antalya by the sea, with a pool and a garden. A boutique hotel that Snezana wanted to open. The life they would build together with Aleftina's money. They discussed which friends would take whose side, which relatives they would need to avoid, how they would change their names if necessary. They kissed, long and deeply. The kind of kiss that speaks of years of closeness, passion, promises made in the dark. And Aleftina filmed it all. When they finally left, promising Rima to return for the finished items on Friday, the bell rang one last time. The door closed. Silence fell over the atelier. Aleftina lowered the phone. Her hands were steady. The trembling had stopped. In its place was something cold, hard, and focused. She felt as if she had stepped out of her body, as if she were watching herself from a great distance. Rima appeared in the doorway. Her eyes were wet with tears. "I'm so sorry, my dear," she whispered. "I've known you for 15 years. I saw you buy your wedding dress in this very shop. I held your mother's hand when she came to pick it up. I couldn't let them destroy you without telling you the truth." Aleftina looked at the phone in her hands. Then she looked at Rima. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was calm. "Thank you for giving me a weapon." The next 7 days were the longest of Aleftina's life. She returned home that same evening and found Arsini reading a newspaper in the living room with a cup of tea in his hand. The samovar gleamed on the sideboard. Classical music played softly from the speakers. Everything looked exactly as it always had. He looked up and smiled. "Good day at the museum?" "Productive," she said, hanging up her coat. "And you?" "Busy. A new project is consuming my whole life. Meetings all day." She kissed him on the cheek. His skin was warm. She felt nothing. That night she lay beside him in their bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to his quiet breathing. The bedroom was dark, quiet, familiar. She had slept in this bed for 10 years. She had dreamed here, laughed here, cried here. Now it felt like a stranger's home. She thought about the 500,000 rubles in their joint account. She thought about the villa in Turkey. She thought about her sister's beautiful laughter, the one she had loved since childhood. She thought about 2 years of lies, 2 years of pretending, 2 years of betrayal. The next morning, while Arsini was at work, she visited a lawyer. Tikhon Romanek was an old family friend, a man in his 60s, with a sharp mind and gentle manners. His office was on Lenin Avenue, in a building where Soviet bureaucrats once held meetings. He listened without interrupting while Aleftina played the recording on her phone. When it ended, he sat in silence for a long time, looking at his hands. "You have evidence," he finally said. "Good evidence. Russian courts are unpredictable, especially in financial matters. But with this, you have leverage. More than leverage. You have a weapon." "I don't need leverage," Aleftina said. "I want him to have nothing left. I want her to have nothing left. I want them to understand what they've done." Tikhon nodded slowly. "Then here is what we will do." By Wednesday, the joint account was empty. Aleftina transferred everything to a new account opened only in her name, at another bank across the city. By Thursday, she had documentation for all the business accounts Arsini had access to, and Tikhon filed the necessary papers to freeze them. By Friday, she hired a private detective to gather additional evidence of the affair, photographs, credit card statements, hotel receipts. All the while, she smiled at Arsini. She kissed him in the mornings. She discussed plans for the anniversary party. She asked about his day. She laughed at his jokes. He noticed nothing. Smizana called twice. Aleftina answered both calls, listening to her sister's cheerful voice, hearing how easily the lies came from her lips. Yes, she was very much looking forward to the party. Yes, she had found the perfect dress. Yes, she loved her sister very much. During the second call, Smizana said, "I'm so glad we're close again. I missed you." And Aleftina said, "I missed you too." And in some way, it was true. She missed the sister she thought she knew. On Saturday morning, the day of the anniversary party, Aleftina woke up at 6 o'clock and looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at her looked the same as always. The same face, the same eyes, the same hair. But she was not the same. She would never be the same again. "You're ready," she said to her reflection. "You've been ready your whole life." The Hyatt Hotel was located in the very center of Ekaterinburg, a glass and steel tower rising above the city like a monument to modernity. The banquet hall on the 7th floor had been transformed for the occasion. White roses everywhere, imported from Holland. Crystal chandeliers catching the light and scattering it like diamonds. A stage with a grand piano, where a trio would play later in the evening. 120 guests filled the hall. The elite of Ekaterinburg society mingled, laughed, and drank champagne. Business leaders in expensive suits, art collectors who bought paintings from Aleftina's museum, university professors, government officials, relatives from both sides. Some had come from Vladivostok and St. Petersburg. Aleftina was wearing a dark burgundy silk dress, made by Rima herself. It hugged her figure and fell to the floor, elegant and restrained. Arseny was wearing his new suit, the one Rima had made, the same one he had posed in with Snezana. He looked handsome. He always looked handsome. Snezana stood by the bar, laughing with cousins, beautiful in a silver dress that caught the light. She raised her glass toward Aleftina across the hall. And smiled. Aleftina smiled back. The evening went on as usual. Dinner was served, traditional Russian dishes, each one flawless. Toasts were made. Arseny gave a speech about 10 years of love and partnership. His voice trembled with false emotion. He spoke about meeting Aleftina at university, about their first date, about the life they had built together. Everyone applauded. Then it was Aleftina's turn. She walked to the stage, went up the 3 small steps, and stood behind the podium. The hall fell silent. All eyes were on her. The piano fell quiet. The waiters froze. Even the clinking of glasses stopped. "Thank you all for coming," she began. Her voice was steady, clear. 10 years is an important date. A decade of marriage, a decade of memories, a decade of love. She paused, looked at Arseny, who was smiling at her from the front table, looked at Snezana, who raised her glass in a toast. Her green eyes shone. "For 10 years I believed I had a perfect marriage. I believed I had a faithful husband. I believed I had a loving sister." A murmur ran through the crowd. People exchanged confused glances. Arseny's smile faltered. Snezana lowered her glass. "Tonight I want to share something with all of you. A gift I prepared for my husband. A surprise he will never forget." She pressed a button on the podium. The large screen behind her came to life. For a moment, it showed slides of wedding photographs, pictures from anniversary trips, happy moments. Their wedding at the church on the Blood, their honeymoon in St. Petersburg, a ski trip in the Urals, a summer in Sochi. Then the image changed. A video, grainy, filmed through a gap in a curtain, but recognizable. Arseny and Snezana standing in Rima's atelier, holding each other in front of the mirror. Their voices filled the hall, amplified by the hotel acoustics. 2 years, Snezana, 2 years pretending at family dinners. 1 more week. Sunday morning we transfer the money and book the tickets. She was always too trusting. Some things never change. The hall exploded. Aleftina watched from the stage as chaos took over the room. Snezana's face went pale, then flushed red. She tried to run, but her cousins blocked her path. Their faces were twisted with shock and anger. Her mother, Aleftina's aunt, cried out and collapsed into a chair. Her father stood frozen with his mouth open, his eyes fixed on the screen. Arseny sat motionless. All color had drained from his face. His parents, sitting beside him, stared at the screen in horror. His mother began to cry. His father grabbed Arseny's arm, demanding an explanation, but Arseny could not speak. The video continued. The kiss, the laughter, the plans about Turkey, the discussion of the villa, the hotel, the new names. Every word, every gesture captured forever. When it finally ended, Aleftina spoke into the microphone again. Her voice cut through the chaos like a knife. The joint account is empty. I transferred everything on Wednesday. The business accounts are frozen. I have already filed for divorce, and Tikhon Romanek has all the documents ready. You wanted to leave on Sunday, Arseny? I'm letting you go tonight with nothing. She stepped down from the stage and walked through the crowd. People moved aside for her like the sea before Moses. Some reached out to touch her hand, to offer support. Others were too shocked to move. She saw Rima standing at the far end of the hall, tears streaming down her face, and nodded to her once. At the door, she stopped and looked back one last time. Snezana was sobbing, ugly, gasping sobs distorting her beautiful face. She was on her knees, reaching toward Aleftina, begging, but her cousins held her back. Arseny was on his feet, arguing with his father, who was pointing at the door and shouting at him to leave. The hall was filled with chaos, shouting, crying, phones recording, people demanding answers. Aleftina walked out. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Russian law was on Aleftina's side, given the evidence of infidelity and the planned financial fraud. Arseny received nothing, no apartment, no car, not a single ruble from the accounts. His career was destroyed. No firm in Ekaterinburg would hire a man whose betrayal had been exposed so publicly. He left the city within a year. Rumors placed him in Moscow, then in Novosibirsk, then in Kazakhstan. Aleftina never saw him again. Snezana left Ekaterinburg the night of the party. She didn't even pack her things. She simply disappeared. Her parents, Aleftina's aunt and uncle, were devastated. They contacted Aleftina a month later, begging for reconciliation, but Aleftina could not. Not now, maybe never. Some wounds are too deep. The family split apart. Some were on Aleftina's side. Some, surprisingly, tried to defend Snezana, claiming she was young, that Arseny had manipulated her. Aleftina let them believe whatever they wanted. She knew the truth. She had heard it with her own ears, seen it with her own eyes. Rima Vasilchuk became a regular guest in Aleftina's home. They drank tea on Sundays, sitting by the window facing the Urals, talking about fabrics, art, and the strange turns of fate. Rima never apologized again. She knew Aleftina didn't need apologies. She needed friendship. I'm sorry that it had to be me who showed you the truth, Rima said once during those first difficult weeks. Don't be sorry, Aleftina replied. You didn't destroy my marriage, you saved my life. A year later, on a cold Tuesday afternoon, Aleftina Kirilenko stood by the window of her apartment and watched the sun set over the Ural Mountains. The sky blazed orange and pink, the same sky that had hung over the city on that terrible day. The apartment now belonged to her, legally and emotionally. The samovar still stood in the dining room. The books still lined the walls. But the photographs had changed. Arseny was no longer there. In his place were pictures of friends, museum openings, a smiling Rima at her sewing machine. Her work flourished. The exhibition of Soviet realists was a critical success. She was promoted. Her name now appeared in national art journals. She traveled to Moscow, St. Petersburg, even Paris. Life went on. The phone rang. Probably Tikhon Romanek with the final documents. She let it ring. She thought about that Tuesday a year ago, the call from Rima, the frantic run through frozen streets, the fitting room, the voices, the recording, the party, the chaos, the freedom. Some stories begin with a whisper. Some begin with a scream. Hers began with 4 words. Come now, hide, trust me. And because she trusted, she survived. Because she survived, she thrived. Because she thrived, she won. Aleftina smiled, turned away from the window, and stepped into her new life. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, please like, share with your loved ones, and subscribe to my channel.